Admiral Zeftar's mandibles clicked in amusement as the human transmission ended. Around the command center of the Empire's flagship, dozens of Kytherian officers burst into their species equivalent of laughter, a harmonious chittering that filled the vast chamber. The holographic display still showed the pale, defeated face of the human representative, a female with tears streaming down her cheeks. Unconditional surrender, Zeftar repeated, savoring each word. After 4 to 7 years of this pathetic resistance, they finally understand their place in the natural order. Subcommander Krixtal approached the Admiral's elevated platform, his forearms spread in a gesture of triumph. "My lord, shall we begin the occupation protocols? The human worlds await our administrative presence." Zeftar's massive form shifted in his command throne, his 6 eyes gleaming with satisfaction. The Kytherian Empire had conquered 1,700 species across the galaxy, but none had been as stubbornly defiant as these humans. Their primitive weapons, their desperate tactics, their refusal to accept superior civilization, it had all been rather entertaining, in a way. Not yet, Zeftar decided. Let them sweat in their fear for a few more cycles. I want to savor this moment. He gestured to the communications officer. Broadcast a surrender message across all Empire channels. Let every species see how human arrogance finally crumbles. The transmission began immediately, reaching billions of Empire citizens across thousands of worlds. On the capital world of HFY, crowds gathered in the floating cities to watch the spectacle. The Empire's 3 moons hung in the amber sky like ancient sentinels, their surfaces covered in temple cities where the high priest had prophesied this exact moment centuries ago. The humans were always amusing. Zeftar mused to his staff. Their emotional displays, their irrational attachments to individual lives, their bizarre concept of hope. But even they couldn't deny reality forever. On the view screen, reports flooded in from across human space. Earth's orbital defenses had powered down. The human fleet was assembling in designated surrender zones. Colony worlds were broadcasting compliance signals. Everything was proceeding exactly as Empire doctrine predicted. "So," the sensor officer called out, "we're detecting massive energy signatures from the human homeworld. It appears they're dismantling their remaining weapon systems." "Excellent," Zeftar said. "Document everything. The Empire archives will want a complete record of humanity's final submission." The celebration continued for hours. Officers shared traditional victory wines, their bioluminescent skin patterns shifting to display their triumph. The ship's internal communications buzzed with excitement as news of the human surrender spread through every deck. This was the moment they had all been waiting for, the end of the longest military campaign in Empire history. But as the 3rd hour of celebration passed, something strange began to happen. The first sign was subtle, a slight dimming in the ambient lighting from the viewport observation decks. The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated almost imperceptibly. Then the long-range sensors began registering anomalous readings from the direction of the capital world. "Admiral," the communications officer said, his voice carrying an edge of confusion, "we're receiving urgent transmission from KYTRA. They are reporting unusual astronomical phenomena." Zeftar's good mood began to sour. "Define unusual." "The transmission is fragmented, sir. Something about the moons. They're saying the moons are—" The message cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Every other channel from the capital world went silent simultaneously. The command center fell quiet except for the hum of machinery and the increasingly frantic beeping of sensor arrays. "What happened to our communications?" Zeftar demanded, rising from his throne. "Unknown, sir. We're trying to re-establish contact, but—" "Sir!" The sensor officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "Long-range telescopic arrays focus on KYTRA. You need to see this." The main display shifted to show their home system. The familiar sight of KYTRA appeared, a golden world orbited by 3 majestic moons that had watched over the Empire for millennia. But as the image resolved, gasps echoed through the command center. The moons were gone. Not destroyed, not hidden behind debris clouds, not moved to different orbits. Simply gone, as if they had never existed at all. Where 3 celestial bodies had hung in space for billions of years, there was now only empty vacuum. "Impossible," Zeftar whispered. This must be an equipment malfunction. Run diagnostics on all sensor arrays. But the diagnostics came back clean. Other ships in the fleet confirmed the readings. The Empire's 3 sacred moons had vanished without a trace, leaving behind no debris, no energy signatures, no explanation. So, the communications officer said, his voice hollow, "We're receiving a new transmission. It's from the humans." The same pale female appeared on the screen, but now she was smiling. Her tears were gone, replaced by something that made Zeftar's chitinous skin crawl. "Admiral Zeftar," she said, "I hope you enjoyed our surrender. We meant every word of it. We surrender to the inevitable. We surrender to the fact that some things in this universe are bigger than war. We surrender to the knowledge that you probably should have listened when we tried to warn you." She leaned forward, her expression shifting to something that predators across the galaxy would recognize. "Your moons didn't vanish, Admiral. We moved them. And if you're wondering how a primitive species like humanity accomplished something impossible, well, that's what happens when you back scientists into a corner for 4 to 7 years. They get creative." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Outside the viewport, the stars themselves seemed to be watching. The silence in the command center stretched like a hell breath. Zeftar stared at the empty space where the moons had been, his 6 eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. Around him, officers stood frozen at their stations, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with confusion and fear. "Sir," Subcommander Crickstow ventured, his voice barely above a whisper, "how do you move a moon?" Zeftar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of stress his crew had never seen before. "You don't. It's physically impossible. The energy requirements alone would exceed the total output of a star. Even our most advanced technology couldn't. Unless," the sensor officer interrupted, then immediately shrank back from his admiral's glare. "Forgive me, sir. I was thinking about the theoretical papers from the research division. There were some studies about dimensional manipulation, but they were classified as impossible." "Impossible," Zeftar repeated. Just like humans surviving 4 to 7 years against the Empire was impossible. Just like their weapons adapting to our shields was impossible. Just like their ability to predict our fleet movements was impossible. The weight of accumulated impossibilities began to settle on the command crew. Throughout the long campaign, they had dismissed human capabilities as luck, desperation, or stolen technology. But now, with 3 moons simply erased from existence, those explanations felt hollow. "So, incoming transmission from the 4th Fleet," the communications officer reported. "Admiral Vextrol is requesting immediate conference." The holographic display shimmered, revealing the scarred face of the Empire's most decorated military commander. Vextrol's usually composed demeanor had cracked, revealing something close to panic. "Zeftar," he said without preamble, "tell me your sensors are malfunctioning. Tell me those moons are still there and this is some kind of human trick." "I wish I could, old friend, but every instrument confirms it. The moons are gone." Vextrol's image flickered as interference disrupted the transmission. "It's not just the moons, Zeftar. We're receiving reports from across the Empire. 17 different systems are reporting astronomical anomalies. Moons vanishing, asteroids appearing where they shouldn't be, even some stars showing unusual behavior." The implications hit Zeftar like a physical blow. If humans could manipulate celestial bodies at will, then every Empire world was vulnerable. Every moon that provided tidal forces, every asteroid belt that served as mining operations, every carefully balanced orbital system that supported their civilization, all of it could be moved, altered, or destroyed at humanity's whim. "There's more?" Vextrol continued. "The High Priests are in chaos. The 3 moons weren't just orbital bodies. They were sacred to our religion. The prophecies, the temple alignments, the entire spiritual foundation of our culture was built around their eternal presence. Without them, the priests are claiming the gods have abandoned us." Through the viewport, Zeftar could see other ships in the fleet. Their running lights seemed dimmer somehow, as if the very absence of the moons had drained energy from the surrounding space. Officers throughout the ship were beginning to whisper among themselves, their disciplined ranks wavering. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out, his voice tight with fear, "we're detecting massive gravitational distortion throughout the system. It's as if space itself is being reshaped. On the display, gravitational maps showed reality bending in impossible ways. The carefully ordered physics that govern galactic civilization were being rewritten in real time by forces beyond Empire comprehension. So, the communications officer said, "We're receiving another transmission from the human homeworld. It's the same female." The human appeared again, but this time she was standing in what appeared to be a vast underground facility. Behind her, Zarkethian could see massive machines whose purpose defied understanding. The technology looked nothing like the crude weapons humans had used during the war. This was something else entirely. "I imagine you're wondering what you're looking at," the human said, gesturing to the machinery behind her. "This is what happens when you systematically destroy every human colony, every research station, every university. You force all the survivors to work together in ways we never would have under normal circumstances." She began walking through the facility, and the camera followed her past screen showing star charts, mathematical equations that hurt to look at, and three-dimensional models of galactic structures. 4 to 7 years ago, we were a divided species scattered across a few dozen worlds. We had brilliant minds, but they were working on different projects, pursuing different theories, competing with each other. Then you came along and gave us a common enemy. You gave us a reason to share everything we knew. She stopped beside a massive cylindrical device that seemed to bend light around itself. "This is what human desperation looks like, Admiral. When you threaten to extinction, we don't just fight back, we evolve. We become something new." The device activated, and reality shimmered around it. On the screen, Zarkethian watched the space itself folded, revealing glimpses of impossible geometries. "Your moons aren't destroyed," the human continued. "They are in a pocket dimension we created specifically for this purpose. We've been building this technology for decades, testing it on asteroids and small planetoids. Every time you attack one of our research facilities, we move the important work deeper underground. Every time you thought you'd set us back, we were actually getting closer to this moment." She smiled, and there was something terrifying in that expression. "You see, Admiral, we weren't fighting a war. We were buying time. Time to finish the greatest scientific project in human history. Time to develop technology that would make your empire irrelevant." The transmission shifted to show exterior views of the facility. Above it, the surface of Earth looked different, scarred by decades of war, but somehow more alive than before. The sky itself seemed to pulse with energy. "We call it the Dimensional Manipulation Project," the human explained. "And your 3 moons were just a demonstration. We wanted to show you what we're capable of before we make our offer." Zarkethian felt his world tilting on its axis. "Offer? Oh yes, Admiral. We're still surrendering. But not to you. We're surrendering to the inevitability of change. The old galaxy, where might makes right and the strong prey on the weak, that's ending. We're ushering in something new." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, but now they seemed different somehow, as if they too were waiting for humanity's next move. The emergency session of the Empire High Council convened in the shadow of absent moons. On HFY, the capital world's floating cities drifted in confusion as their tidal generators failed and ancient navigational systems went dark. The sacred temple cities, built to align with the 3 moons' orbital patterns, now pointed toward empty space. Zarkethian stood before the assembled council members, their holographic forms flickering with poor signal quality. The dimensional distortions were interfering with standard communication protocols, forcing them to rely on backup systems designed for war zones. "The situation is unprecedented," Zarkethian reported, his voice carrying across the chamber. "In 73 hours, these humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our understanding of physics. They haven't just moved 3 moons, they created technology that can manipulate the fundamental structure of space-time." High Council HFY, her ancient form supported by a life maintenance suit, leaned forward. "Admiral, in your professional opinion, what are we dealing with? Are these humans somehow allied with another power? The Vorthak Collective? The Singing Worlds?" "No, Your Eminence. This is entirely human in origin. Our intelligence networks confirm they've been working in complete isolation. What we're seeing is a result of their own scientific development, accelerated by decades of warfare. The chamber erupted in chitting voices as council members struggled to process this information. The Sci-Fi Empire had dominated the galaxy for millennia precisely because they possessed the most advanced technology. The idea that a primitive species could surpass them was fundamentally destabilizing. But how? Demanded War Master Krelnuth. Our own research divisions have studied dimensional manipulation for centuries. Every analysis concluded it was impossible without energy sources that don't exist in nature. Zephyr activated the display, showing the underground facility from the human transmission. According to our analysis, they've solved the energy problem through quantum field manipulation. Instead of generating power, they are borrowing it from parallel dimensions and returning it in a controlled collapse. It's elegant, efficient, and completely beyond our current capabilities. The implications rippled through the council. If humans could access unlimited energy from other dimensions, then every assumption about galactic warfare, economics, and civilization itself was now obsolete. "Sir," a junior officer interrupted, his voice shaking. "Urgent transmission from the human homeworld. They're broadcasting to every Empire frequency simultaneously." The display shifted to show the human female again, but now she was standing in a different location, what appeared to be a vast observation deck overlooking Earth's surface. Behind her, the planet's continents were visible, but they looked wrong somehow, as if the very geography was shifting. "Greetings, citizens of the Sci-Fi Empire," she began, her voice carrying across thousands of star systems. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I'm the Director of Humanity's Dimensional Research Initiative. I want to address the chaos you're experiencing right now." She gestured to the changing landscape behind her. "What you're seeing is the beginning of Earth's transformation. For 47 years, we've been preparing for this moment. Every attack on our colonies, every destroyed research station, every life lost, it all contributed to this project." The camera pulled back to reveal the full scope of the facility. It wasn't just underground. It extended into space itself, with massive structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The technology was so advanced it appeared almost organic, as if it had grown rather than been built. "We call it the Dimensional Nexus," Dr. Chen continued. "From here, we can manipulate matter and energy across multiple realities. Your moons are safe. By the way, they're in a stable pocket dimension where they'll remain until we decide what to do with them." She began walking along the observation deck, and the camera followed. "But the moons were just the beginning. We've been studying your empire for decades, learning how your society works, understanding your weaknesses. Did you know that your entire economic system depends on resource extraction from exactly 17,432 key mining sites? We've just moved 12% of those sites into pocket dimensions." The council chamber exploded into chaos as the implications hit home. The Empire's economy was built on a carefully balanced network of resource extraction, processing, and distribution. If humans could arbitrarily remove key components of that network, they could collapse entire sectors of galactic civilization. "Trade routes," Dr. Chen continued, her voice calm despite the pandemonium she was causing. "Your empire depends on precisely timed cargo shipments along established hyperspace lanes. We've identified the critical junction points and can relocate them at will. In fact, we've already moved 3 of them as another demonstration." On the display, reports began flooding in from across the Empire. Major trade routes were reporting ships arriving at empty space where important waypoint stations should have been. Cargo fleets were stranded in interstellar void, their navigation systems unable to compensate for the missing landmarks. "But here's what I really want you to understand," Dr. Chen said, turning to face the camera directly. "We're not your enemies. We never were. You made us your enemies by attacking our colonies, by treating us as inferior, by refusing to listen when we tried to establish diplomatic relations." She paused, and for a moment, the weight of 47 years of warfare seemed to settle on her shoulders. Every human life lost in this conflict was preventable. Every destroyed colony, every murdered civilian, every child who grew up without parents, all of it could have been avoided if your empire had been willing to recognize us as equals. The transmission showed other humans now, scientists, engineers, and survivors from dozens of different worlds. They were all working together with a unified purpose that the Empire had never achieved among its own diverse species. "So here's our offer," Dr. Chen continued. "We're prepared to return your moons, your mining sites, and your trade routes. We're prepared to share our dimensional technology with you, to teach you how to access the same power we've discovered. We're prepared to help you transform your empire into something better than it ever was." She leaned forward, her expression intensifying. "But first, you need to do something your empire has never done before. You need to admit that you were wrong. You need to acknowledge that your treatment of other species, including humanity, was a mistake, and you need to be willing to change." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Outside, the absent moons continued to haunt the sky, their missing presence a constant reminder of humanity's impossible power. High Counselor Thexere spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're asking us to abandon everything our empire stands for. Our entire civilization is built on the principle of superior species guiding inferior ones. If we accept their terms, we're admitting that principle is false. But if we don't accept," Zeftar replied, "they can dismantle our entire civilization piece by piece. They've already demonstrated they can remove any physical asset we depend on. Our fleets, our worlds, our entire infrastructure, none of it is safe from their dimensional manipulation." The council members looked at each other, seeing their own fear reflected in alien eyes. For the first time in galactic history, the Sci-Fi Empire faced an enemy they couldn't defeat, couldn't understand, and couldn't ignore. And that enemy was offering them salvation, if they were willing to surrender everything they believed about themselves. The debate raged for 18 hours straight. In the Empire's Great Council chamber, representatives from 700 species argued with a desperation that had never been seen before. The galaxy's most powerful civilization was fracturing along lines that had been hidden for millennia. Zeftar watched from his position at the military advisory panel as ancient alliances crumbled. The hegemony of Scales, traditional allies of the Kytherians, were now openly questioning whether the Empire's expansion policies had been wise. The Silicon Collective, who had provided technological expertise for centuries, were demanding access to human dimensional research. Even the warrior caste of Orthac, the Empire's most loyal enforcers, were beginning to whisper about the futility of fighting an enemy who could simply relocate their homeworld. "Order!" High Counselor Thexere commanded, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustic systems. "We will not solve this crisis through chaos. The humans have given us 72 hours to respond to their offer. 43 hours remain." War Master Krelnuth rose from his position, his massive frame casting shadows across the chamber. "High Counselor, I propose we respond with overwhelming force. Deploy every fleet, every weapon, every resource we possess. If these humans can manipulate dimensions, then we must act before they can fully demonstrate their capabilities." "And achieve what?" challenged Science Prime Yultara. "They've already moved critical infrastructure into pocket dimensions. Our fleets would be attacking empty space while our own supply lines collapse. Military action is not just futile, it's suicidal." The chamber erupted again, but this time the sound was different. Instead of the confident chittering of a species accustomed to dominance, there was an edge of genuine fear. The Empire's citizens were beginning to understand that their way of life was ending, whether they accepted humanity's offer or not. So, a communications officer approached Zeftar. "We're receiving report from our occupation forces in human space. The situation is unusual." Zeftar accessed the reports through his neural interface. What he saw defied explanation. Empire troops stationed on conquered human worlds were reporting that their weapons had simply vanished. Not destroyed, not disabled, gone entirely, as if they had never existed. But the humans weren't attacking or attempting to escape. They were offering medical aid, food, and shelter to the stranded Empire forces. "They are not treating us as enemies," one report read. "The humans are acting as if we're refugees in need of assistance. They've established medical stations for our wounded and are providing technical support for our ships. When we asked why, they said they were practicing for the future." The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just demonstrating military superiority. They were modeling a completely different approach to interspecies relations. They were showing the Empire's own soldiers what cooperation looked like instead of domination. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout human space. It appears they are doing something to their entire star system." The main display shifted to show the human homeworld. Earth was surrounded by a lattice of energy that seemed to extend in directions that didn't exist in normal space. The planet itself was glowing with a soft light that pulsed in rhythm with something vast and invisible. "They are terraforming their entire system," Science Primeval Tara whispered. "Not just planets. They are restructuring space itself to optimize for life. The energy requirement should be impossible, but they are doing it anyway." A new transmission began, and Dr. Chen appeared on the display. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from dozens of species, not just humans, but refugees from worlds the Empire had conquered, survivors from civilizations that had been absorbed into the Kytherian hierarchy. "Citizens of the Empire," Dr. Chen began, "I want you to meet some friends of ours. These are people from worlds your Empire has conquered over the centuries. They've been working with us to develop something unprecedented in galactic history, a true cooperative civilization." The camera showed the diverse group of beings working together on projects that seemed to blend their different technological approaches. Crystalline entities shared data with organic computers. Energy beings collaborated with matter-based life forms. Species that had been enemies for millennia were now sharing knowledge and resources. "This is what happens when you stop trying to dominate other species and start trying to understand them," Dr. Chen continued. "Every culture, every species, every individual has something unique to contribute. The Empire's approach of forcing conformity doesn't just suppress others, it wastes the incredible diversity of the galaxy." She gestured to a massive screen showing progress reports from hundreds of different projects. "In the last 4 to 7 years, working together, we've solved problems that individual species struggled with for centuries. We've developed faster-than-light communication, unlimited energy generation, and yes, dimensional manipulation. But more importantly, we've created a model for how different species can coexist without anyone having to surrender their identity." The transmission showed cities being built using technology that combined the best innovation from multiple civilizations. Architecture that was simultaneously organic and crystalline, powered by energy sources that existed in parallel dimensions, populated by beings who had chosen to work together rather than being forced to submit. "Your Empire has a choice," Dr. Chen said. "You can continue trying to maintain dominance through force, and watch as we gradually remove every resource and tool you use to oppress others. Or you can join us in building something better." She paused, and her expression grew more serious. "But understand this, we're not waiting for your decision to move forward. Every day, more of your former subjects are joining our cooperative. Every day, we're developing new technologies that make your military power less relevant. Every day, we're building a future where the Empire's approach to civilization becomes obsolete." The transmission showed other star systems now, former Empire territories where the inhabitants had chosen to work with humanity rather than remain under Kytherian control. These worlds were transforming, their populations working together in ways that exceeded anything the Empire had achieved through conquest. "This is our final offer," Dr. Chen concluded. "Join us as equals, not as rulers. Contribute your knowledge and culture to our cooperative, and benefit from the combined wisdom of hundreds of species. Help us build a galaxy where every being can reach their full potential." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in a silence that felt like the pause before a storm. Outside, the Empire's fleets hung in space, their weapons useless against an enemy who could simply remove whatever they targeted. Below, billions of citizens looked up at a sky where their sacred moons had once hung, now empty except for the stars. High Counselor Thexera looked around the chamber at representatives from hundreds of species, seeing the same realization in every face. The Empire's time as the galaxy's dominant power was ending. The only question was whether they would help build what came next, or fade into history as a cautionary tale about the dangers of refusing to change. "The vote will be tomorrow," she announced. "Tonight, we all have a choice to make, not just as representatives of our species, but as individuals who must decide what kind of galaxy we want to live in." As the session ended, Zephdar looked out at the stars one last time as Admiral of the Empire's fleet. Tomorrow, he might be something else entirely. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. As the session ended, Zephdar looked out at the stars one last time as Admiral of the Empire's fleet. Tomorrow, he might be something else entirely. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The vote was closer than anyone expected. When the final tally appeared on the chamber's main display, the numbers told a story of a civilization torn between its past and its future. 347 species voted to accept humanity's offer. 302 voted to reject it. The remaining 51 abstained, unable to choose between the certainty of their current existence and the unknown promise of something better. High Counselor Thexere looked at the results with a mixture of relief and sorrow. By the narrowest margin in Empire history, we accept the human proposal. May the ancestors forgive us for what we're about to become. The chamber erupted in chaos as the implications sank in. Representatives who had voted against the proposal began filing out, their holographic forms flickering with interference as they severed connections to the council networks. Some were shouting about betrayal, others about the end of their civilization. A few were weeping in ways their species had never done before. But those who remained felt something else, a strange sense of anticipation. For the first time in their lives, they were about to experience something genuinely new. Admiral, the communications officer called out to Zephdar, "We're receiving a transmission from Dr. Chen. She is requesting permission to board the flagship." Zephdar's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. She's requesting permission? She could simply teleport herself here if she wanted to. The transmission activated, showing Dr. Chen standing in what appeared to be a small spacecraft. But as the image resolved, Zephdar realized it wasn't a ship in any conventional sense. It was a pocket of folded space-time that existed independently of normal reality. "Admiral," Dr. Chen said, "I'd like to come aboard, if that's acceptable. I think it's time we met in person." "By all means, Doctor, though I confess I'm curious why you're asking rather than simply appearing." Her smile was warm and genuine. "Because that's how equals treat each other, Admiral. With respect and courtesy, even when one side has overwhelming power." The dimensional vessel materialized in the flagship's main hangar, its arrival causing reality to shimmer like heat waves. Dr. Chen emerged alone, wearing a simple uniform that bore no insignia of rank or authority. She looked smaller than she had in the transmissions, more human somehow, but there was something in her eyes that suggested depths of knowledge and experience far beyond her apparent age. Zephdar met her at the hangar entrance, flanked by his senior staff. The moment felt historic, the first time in galactic history that a conquered species had negotiated with their conquerors as equals. "Doctor," Zephdar said, offering the traditional Kytherian gesture of respect. "I must admit, this is not how I expected our war to end." "That's because it wasn't really a war, Admiral. It was a misunderstanding that lasted 4 to 7 years. Dr. Chen returned the gesture, then extended her hand in the human custom. "We never wanted to fight you. We just wanted to survive long enough to show you what we were capable of." They walked together through the ship's corridors, passing Empire personnel who stared in fascination at the human who had single-handedly changed the course of galactic history. Dr. Chen seemed genuinely interested in the ship's design, asking technical questions about systems that had nothing to do with military applications. "You're studying our technology," Zephdar observed. "Of course. That's what we do. We learn from everyone we meet. Your empire has developed some remarkable innovations over centuries. We'd like to understand them better so we can adapt them for our cooperative projects." They reached Zephdar's private quarters, where he had prepared a meal using traditional Empire hospitality customs. Dr. Chen accepted the food graciously, even though it was clearly not suited to human biology. "I have to ask," Zephdar said, "how long have you been planning this?" The dimensional technology, the coordinated response, the perfect timing. This couldn't have been developed in 4 to 7 years. Dr. Chen smiled. "You're right. We've been working on dimensional theory for over a century. But the breakthrough came when your empire forced us to share all our research. Before the war, human scientists were competing with each other, hoarding discoveries, working in isolation. Your attacks changed that. They made us realize that our survival depended on cooperation." She pulled out a small device that projected a holographic timeline. "Every time you destroyed one of our research facilities, we distributed the work to other locations. Every time you captured our scientists, others took up their research. Every time you thought you were setting us back, you were actually accelerating our progress. The timeline showed the gradual convergence of human knowledge, physics, engineering, biology, and even philosophy coming together in ways that had never been possible before. The Empire's campaign of destruction had accidentally created the conditions for humanity's greatest scientific breakthrough. So when you said you were surrendering, we meant it completely. We surrendered to the inevitable, that the old way of doing things was ending. Your empire represents the final stage of a galactic civilization based on domination and hierarchy. We represent the beginning of something based on cooperation and mutual respect. Dr. Chen stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the Empire fleet. Would you like to see what we're building, Admiral? Not just the technology, but the society itself. She activated a device again, and suddenly the room filled with images from across the galaxy. Worlds that had been barren were now blooming with life. Species that had been enemies were working together on projects that seemed to defy possibility. Children from dozens of different civilizations were learning together, playing together, growing up without the fear that had defined the Empire era. This is what the galaxy looks like when people choose cooperation over conquest, Dr. Chen said. When they choose to build rather than destroy, to include rather than exclude, to learn rather than dominate. Zephdar felt something he had never experienced before, a deep sense of loss of opportunities that had never existed. What happens to us now? To those of us who spent our lives enforcing the Empire's will? That depends on what you choose to do next. Some of your people will probably never accept the change. They'll retreat to isolated systems and try to maintain the old ways. We won't stop them, but we won't help them either. Eventually, they'll either adapt or fade away. She turned back to face him. But others, like you, will discover that there's something liberating about not having to be the galaxy's policeman anymore. Instead of spending your energy maintaining control over others, you can spend it exploring, creating, building something new. The ship's communication system activated, and Subcommander Crickstall's voice filled the room. Admiral, we're receiving reports from across the fleet. The humans are beginning to return our missing infrastructure. Mining stations are reappearing in normal space, trade routes are being restored, and, sir, the 3 moons are back in their proper orbits. Dr. Chen smiled, a gesture of good faith. We're returning everything we moved, exactly as it was before. Your economy should be stable again within a few days. Just like that. Zephdar asked. No conditions, no demands. Just like that. We told you we weren't your enemies. Admiral, we meant it. Over the following hours, reports flooded in from across the Empire. The humans were not only returning stolen infrastructure, but were actively helping to repair damage from the war. Their dimensional technology was being used to restore destroyed colonies, to heal environmental damage, to reunite families that had been separated by decades of conflict. But more than that, they were teaching. Human scientists were sharing their knowledge freely, showing Empire researchers how to manipulate dimensions, how to access unlimited energy, how to build the impossible. There were no patents, no trade secrets, no attempts to maintain technological superiority. Everything was offered freely to anyone willing to learn. Why? Zephdar asked during one of their conversations. Why give away the very technology that made you powerful? Dr. Chen looked at him with the patience of someone who had answered this question many times before. Because power isn't about having something others don't, Admiral. Real power is about what you can accomplish, and you can accomplish more with partners than with subjects. The transformation began slowly, then accelerated beyond anyone's expectations. Within months, former Empire worlds were experimenting with cooperative governance. Species that had been forced to conform to Kytherian standards were rediscovering their own cultures while simultaneously learning from others. The rigid hierarchy that had defined galactic civilization for millennia began to dissolve into something fluid and dynamic. Zephdar found himself appointed as a liaison between the former Empire military and the new cooperative structures. It was strange work. Instead of commanding fleets to enforce compliance, he was helping to coordinate exploration missions, scientific expeditions, and cultural exchange programs. Do you ever miss it? Dr. Chen asked him during one of their regular meetings. The certainty of the old system, the clear chain of command. Zeftar considered the question as he looked out at the stars. Sometimes. But then I remember that the old certainty was built on the suffering of others. This uncertainty, it's frightening, but it's also full of possibilities we never imagined. The galaxy was changing in ways that no one could have predicted. Art forms were emerging that combined the aesthetics of dozens of different species. Technologies were being developed that required cooperation between matter-based and energy-based life forms. Philosophies were evolving that incorporated the wisdom of civilizations that had been enemies for centuries. And at the center of it all, humanity continued to act quietly, teaching, learning, and facilitating connections between species that had never communicated before. They had become what they had always claimed to be, not conquerors, but gardeners, helping the galaxy bloom into something it had never been before. Years later, when historians tried to pinpoint the moment the Empire truly ended, they would struggle to find a specific date. There had been no final battle, no surrender ceremony, no dramatic collapse. Instead, there had been a gradual awakening to the possibility that civilization could be something other than a zero-sum game. The Empire had laughed at human surrender, but in the end, it was the Empire that had surrendered to the inevitable truth that evolution, not domination, was the only path to lasting success. And the galaxy, for the first time in its history, was learning to laugh together. The Empire laughed at human surrender. Then their moons vanished.